And hello, this is Robert Romano with comicscape.org, and I am going to do more fun stuff in Clip Studio Paint. And we're back. All right. Just had to get a few things set up here. Send out a link here. No one knows that this is going on, except for 69 of my subscribers. Anyone tuning in, thank you. Let's see here. We're going to have to go to YouTube, find the link, drop the link into Twitter at least. There we go. Let's paint. Mute that. Then we go over to Twitter. Go to profile. We post it. All right. Let's see here. What do we say? Let's just take the headline and we'll put it onto Twitter here. And anyone who wants to come, they will be on their way. Maybe we'll get a guest here. Let's see, how do you, okay, we've shared the link. We can drop it into StreamYard too, I suppose. We've dropped it around a few places though. Hold off on doing that for the time being. And we'll just start painting. How is everyone doing today? Nice summer Sunday afternoon. I'm working on Children of the Grave here. I need to clean this up. Cleaned up most of the body here. And this wing should have her left, your right. And this right here, I need to get in here and clean that. And then we're going to do a little painting when I tire of erasing lines. Or actually, it's mostly, I would say, they're artifacts from scanning, as well as not getting everything, all the pencil lines off of the piece of artwork when I scanned it. You erase it to your best of your ability, but you just want to I have to go in here afterwards and get rid of all these dots to get a cleaner look and representation, so that if and when you put colors on top of it, it'll look good. I don't have too much time to work on this stuff, so I have to do it on the weekend and spare time. And I'm still learning about how do you make a comic book page. And so I feel like I can draw, and maybe I should just draw everything first and then worry about this production stuff later, in terms of how you represent it. Let's see here. And you can see I was just checking to see how it renders on YouTube to see if, can you even see those little black dots? It's like, yeah, you got to get rid of these black dots here. So go back to Clip Studio Paint. Okay. I'm going to mute for a second. All right, back again. Heading back into the paint. Here we go. So what is going on? Maybe doing this late at night is the best way to go. Probably a lot of live streams or just a lovely Sunday afternoon. Maybe you were just listening to Ethan. You've already had your fill of streaming for the day. That makes sense. And just trying to create some content here. Sometimes you get an interesting guest. We had Tank Ferret came on last time I was live. That was fun. I don't know if he's around. See, Amit Rayner came on. Regular of the chat. Might know him from maybe the old Oz show. So it's fun to chat with people. See if anyone's showing up here. No, it's just me. Streaming with yourself. It's cool. It's cool. Sometimes it takes a little while for people to figure out something's going on. Even thought, you just do a short live stream, you're chatting. What is going on? What is going on in the world? Had an interesting exchange with Hero Geek on Twitter yesterday. Everyone should check out Geektastic Duo on YouTube. Check out his channel. He's got lots of content there. And the question was whether people should watch the new He-Man or just ignore it. And he says ignore it. I kind of lean in favor of that. I don't care to watch it. I read about it, and they kill He-Man and Skeletor in the first episode. It's like, oh, that's not He-Man. It's like, oh, I can get my kids psyched up, watch all the old Masters of the Universe stuff, and then throw this thing on. And it's like, oh, they killed the hero in the first episode. Sorry. Oh, that's not a He-Man show. It's like, oh, the heck with it. Why bother? We'll just watch One Piece or something. Watch more anime. That's what my son likes to watch. He likes One Piece. That's his favorite show. So we watch that together. That's fun. Get some good father and son moments there. Enjoying a cartoon for someone his age. He's 11 years old. And God bless him. He's a great kid. Great, great kid. I love my son. Love my daughter. Love my family. Family is the most important thing. More important than anything else, I think. Protect your families. That's the most important thing. And let's see here if anyone's showing up. And so that was one question. But I say, you still need to talk about what the mainstream is doing. So you don't have to necessarily patronize them in order to criticize them. I think, but because think about it, a lot of people probably found out about the Fandom Menace and Comicsgate and Extension because of The Last Jedi and how terrible it was and what they did to Luke Skywalker. And there's still people out there who haven't heard that message yet. They're not on YouTube, but they might be on their way here right now. And so we need to have probably content waiting for them that's criticizing the mainstream. And in the process, that will create an opportunity to show them alternatives like Comicsgate, like Cyberfrog or Kozor, or Rainbow the Groot or Children of the Grave, whatever you're working on. Anthony Romano and ABN have Hunting Alice. Check out Hunting Alice on Indiegogo. So I do think there's some value to talking about the mainstream, especially in opposition to it. My day job is in politics, and why do I do Comicsgate? Because sometimes I don't want to think about politics, but in politics, sometimes you find yourself in the minority, in the opposition. And so you're going to talk about your opponents. You're going to talk about how terrible they are and why they suck, and why your way is better, why your ideas are superior. You compare and contrast that way. So I think there's a balance there. It's not one or the other. I was listening to Ethan, and they were talking about the Streisand effect. It's like, oh, we're helping Kevin Smith by talking about Kevin Smith. And I suppose there's some truth to that. It's like, he's out there anyway, so they're gonna monetize you. If you're complaining about He-Man, they're gonna monetize you. So there's one side of it. The other side of it is that people are gonna see the fact that people are complaining about He-Man. They're gonna check it out and say, oh, that sucks. I don't care for that. And my super chat was, they're gonna go online and they're gonna find out what happens. Like, why is this happening? And maybe they'll stumble on a live stream. Maybe they'll find Ethan or some of these other YouTube creators who are really doing a fantastic job of, sticking it to the mainstream and saying, hey, this is bad. Whether in Comicsgate or to Fandom Menace. So I think that's a valuable thing. That's my opinion about it. I think you're almost forced to talk about it. And so maybe you'd rather not, it's like, oh, I don't want to talk about Joe Biden's terrible policies. But if you're in the opposition, you kind of have to. You have to talk about your opponent and say what a terrible job you think that they're doing and why you think somebody else would do a better job. Maybe you're supporting a policy that's better, or you're supporting a candidate that you think is better. So I think it's kind of similar to that. And like I said, there's a balance there. Let's see. So what we're doing here is Dragon Wings. This is Mortacia fighting Frizzit in Hades, trying to reclaim her throne. She's been overthrown. She's a queen of Hades in exile, and she's going to try to reclaim her throne. But she's basically on her own, and she's going to try to do this by herself. And I think she's going to get into trouble, even though she's a goddess. She's not necessarily invulnerable. She had to take up residence in Tartarus away from Hades because she was losing the power to render judgment on the dead. And the reason for that is because of the appearance of the undead. So thinking about the mechanics of that, you're the goddess of death, but suddenly the undead appear and they're undermining your ability to say who lives and who dies. That's your job. You're killing people, or you're at least telling them when their time has come. And so it's not the best job in the world, but that is her job. But her evil aunt Dantuia, she starts to create undead, and this undermines her powers to render judgment. And so she flees Hades, and she leaves it as a power vacuum. And then her brother comes in and takes up residence. Her brother is the evil god of war called Erithus. He was killed by his twin brother, Atinus, after millennia of fighting. And so the premise here is that, or one of the premises is that she has to find a way to reclaim the throne of Hades, because in her absence, the city of the dead, where she was sending people off to paradise, or maybe they had to do a little time in Hades to make up for whatever their sins might have been before they could go to paradise. The city of the dead has become the realm of the damned, and Erithus, he's the god of tyranny. He is torturing all of humanity. And so whether you live or die, you're going to hell. And so she's trying to right that injustice by reclaiming her throne and doing her job. But I think she's going to get into trouble. And we'll have a book about part of that, part of what's going on in the underworld. And then there's a whole section that's about what's going on the surface in a medieval fantasy world. The world is called Danae. That was Danae. And this is kind of like a D&D, is it vanilla fantasy? Oh, gee, I hope not. I hope there's enough cool stuff in here, but stuff that's familiar in the genre. You want it to be original, though. I mean, but familiar, so yet not original, right? But it's my favorite genre. I grew up playing SSI games on the Commodore 64, Dungeons and Dragons, Pool of Radiance, Curse of the Azure Bonds, games like that. Even Hillsfar, which in hindsight wasn't so great. It was cool, though. They had like arcade style that they tried to do, but maybe not so successfully. But games like that, and then eventually you graduate to tabletop. So I think about how did I learn about D&D? Was probably by seeing the computer games at Toys R Us, getting those, saying, "Oh, that looks cool," and then finding out that there's books. So then you go to the bookstore, you find the books. TSR had great novels, so you purchase the novels, and then you're like, "Oh wow, there's world books and then the player's handbook." So that's one way, I think, not the only way, but that was one way that somebody like me, it was 9, 10, 11 at the time. That's how I discovered D&D, rather circuitously, by seeing the genre portrayed in other media, in this case, computer games. And I think that to a certain degree, that's what happens today with something like anime and manga. Like, how does a kid find manga? He's probably seeing the anime cartoons. And on Netflix or Funimation or whatever, and then they want more, so they get the books. They say, "Oh, I want the books. Let's get the books." Or maybe they see something cool on YouTube and they catch on that way. And so you got to go where the people are. And if people are watching the streaming, it would behoove creators to find some way to maybe make a cartoon that competes, and then it introduces people to your character. I've seen some trailers that are animated that are amazing. Let's see. Kyle Ritter had a great trailer for Starblades. I remember Narwhal had one for Foreign Agent, and there are others. But just think about what goes into creating a cartoon, and it can take, if you're just one guy trying to do animation, it could take months or longer just to do a sequence in your spare time, because you're having to do so many frames and you have to individually draw each one of those things. That's why at the big studios, you probably have teams of people who are devoted to just one scene or whatever. And then, you kind of have them working around the clock so that you can put together animation. So it's definitely tough. Like, I'm not saying that's easy. It just occurs to me that, if we want to find kids, you got to go where the kids are, for, in the long term. Like, if the goal is to find, to create programming or books that kids would probably enjoy. Kids like comic books, even ones that, they don't even know they like comic books. Maybe they have never held a comic book. My son likes comics. And so his favorite comic, the one he chose when we went to the comic shop when he was younger, was Sonic and Mega Man, because we were playing those video games, and that was the one he wanted. And so, he's still reading old Archie comics, Sonic the Hedgehog stuff. He enjoys that, and and he's graduating to manga via anime. So we're going to run out of anime to watch. And then he's going to want the books, and I'll go get them for him. Go to Amazon, probably. And then there's, I have a whole stack of old comics that are definitely worth reading. I have Uncanny X-Men from giant-sized all the way up until probably 340 or something. And that's a lot of content. If he wants to read the old comic books, he certainly could do that. That I have there. Pretty decent stack. I have some old Daredevil. Some of that's more mature, though, so maybe that'll wait. Let them check out Man Without Fear by Frank Miller and John Romita Jr. Really, that was an eye opener. Or The Dark Knight Returns, another Frank Miller classic. And those are just iconic. Like I swear, so many great things came out in the '80s that will just never be topped. And it's kind of like that with the X-Men. You find that the Claremont material is definitely superior because it was setting the standard, right? And so I actually arrived, and those were back issues to me. So I arrived at Uncanny 300, and I thought it was really good. But compared to the old stuff, the Lobdell run, I really enjoyed it. Age of Apocalypse, I thought was really good. And even the Romita run, as brief as it was there, that's what got me into Romita. It's like, oh, he's the X-Men artist. And it's like, oh, I like that. I like that style. And I like Joe Madureira, who came afterwards as well. I'd say those two artists definitely probably influenced me the most in my own style here, which I hope is unique. But I was drawing comic books in high school. We had the Soldiers of Genocide. I wanted to do a piece about villains. So it was going to be, here's these super villains, and we'll make them the protagonists. Maybe that would be interesting. A book about villains. I don't know if it really holds up, though. Like, just people really want to, what good is the villain without the hero? And so, but there are heroes in there. Some of them are kind of anti-heroes, though. I don't know. It was just wanted to do something different. So that's what I was coming up in high school. Maybe I'll do Soldiers of Genocide sometime. Do a new version of that. I want to do Children of the Grave, though. I think this is where my passion lies, in this medieval genre fantasy. For me, it's fun. It's a unique thing with Conan and Tolkien, and later Gygax and Greenwood and Weiss and Hickman, Robert Jordan. So much material there that is so awesome. And it's just a great genre. I like knights and wizards and that sort of thing. It's not everyone's cup of tea. That's cool. That's what I like. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do what I like, and then I know there's a fan base for that, and maybe it'll come along. Children of the Grave actually started out as a D20 setting in 2001. I was excited. I was 21 years old, and Wizards of the Coast was doing you could get a license to create games in the Dungeons and Dragons rule set. This was for the 3rd edition. So I signed up for that, and then put out a couple of books that didn't sell. We were trying to do PDFs and didn't really know what we were doing. Didn't have much capital, and so it's just like, oh, we'll do this after our college classes. All right, go to college. Okay, all right, now let's go back to the project. But in the process, I created a whole world. And later I was thinking, I always wanted to do comics. Maybe that was my first love. Maybe I can combine these two things and make a graphic novel. So in about 2008, 2009, I started writing it as a novel and then drawing panel-to-panel stuff for it. Just the kind of ideas, because, by then I'm working and done with college. And so then you just find you have less time to do the things that you were passionate about, whether it's art or music. I love Comicsgate. It's encouraging creativity. I suppose you consider me a hobbyist in that regard. That's cool. Could this be a profession? Like, you got to raise a good chunk of money. The guys who are doing well and excelling in indie comics right now, some of them are beginners or first-time creators, and that's, kind of what gives you hope if you're trying to break into it. And many of them are professionals who have left the mainstream and who agree with the Comicsgate critique of the mainstream, and they're finding glorious success. And so that gives you hope that, there's a significant enough fan base to potentially break in, but you got to build your channel. Something I was mindful of. And I realized I didn't have much of a following to break in and do something like that. So I spent a year making comicsgate.org. At first is, kind of an idea, what could, here's comicsgate.org on GoDaddy for $18. What could we do with that? So I turned it into something that would have everyone's videos whose hashtag in Comicsgate appear automatically on the website. And then I find their projects and I post those, and those posts automatically to social media. So it kind of turned it into a promotional tool. I thought that could be valuable. See if anyone's checking in. Nobody. This is the hard part of doing live streaming when you don't have that many followers. You got to pick a good time. Maybe people watch this later, enjoy the commentary. Alternatively, what you could do is just turn on some music and draw and hit mute. That way, in case, you got to go run and help with the kids, you can hit pause and do that. But I'm just talking. Maybe we'll make this a short one. Nobody checks in. And there's some thought that draw streams just aren't that fun. But I figure if I'm going to be down here drawing anyways, why not try to create a little content? I mean, even the one that I did in the middle of the night, and maybe that's a better time. It's just like, just turn on the StreamYard at 1 o'clock in the morning and start streaming. People are up, people are night owls, or people are on the West Coast, and the East Coast YouTubers have gone to bed, so you could fill in a slot there. So there's a lot of experimentation there. Find a format that works. But, I got some feedback on the live stream. I didn't think much of it. I was just kind of talking about environmental, social, and governance investing and how that's impacting entertainment. So I did it based on that feedback. I said, I should do a follow-up video that kind of summarizes what the arguments are. And the essence of it is that in the 2010s, the Obama administration, and this is part of what's going on. It's not it doesn't all come down to this regulation, but this is a huge part of it, because when you give your money to your 401k, it goes to mutual funds. And what the Obama administration allowed for was social justice investing, ESG investing, that you can invest money in companies who pursue social agendas rather than solely profit. They claim that they're basically still profitable either way. So they say, why can't we just, have a special rating for social justice investing, and then that would be suitable for retirement investment as well. And once they opened the door for that, it allowed for billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions, and ultimately there's trillions of dollars being invested in social justice invested right now. And to me, if you look at the companies that we're criticizing right now, Hasbro, Mattel, Disney, and you read their brochures, their corporate pamphlets, their annual reports that they send out to investors, it's all about social justice goals and metrics and how they're evaluating themselves and what they view themselves as. Mattel says that they're a purpose company. So they're not there merely to sell toys and make a profit. has to serve a greater social need or something like that. And so that's the type of investors, that's the type of competition that's out there in the mainstream right now. And it's all woke social justice bullshit. And, people are kind of criticizing that. And they're saying, oh, well, we don't like that. And so maybe you go onto social media, you go onto Twitter, and you'll find some aspect of that. You disagree with it, you'll respond to it. But you might not even be responding to real people. You could be responding to bots. These companies are so massive that, they could just pay people to go on social media and promote their stuff, or, be trolls. Tank Ferret called them professional trolls on the last stream. So I think there's an aspect to that. All right, check back in. Just got to keep an eye on it in case someone does decide they want to wander into here. What I could also do is copy into the chat. You're in the chat. If I recognize you, I'll let you in. Sometimes, people can come on and be trolls themselves, but so there's always a risk of dropping a link in the chat. So if you're watching, at home, you want to chat about what's going on in entertainment, why it's important. Why is it important? Art's important. And great works of art, we are talking about hundreds and even thousands of years later, stuff that really stands the test of time. This is kind of an antiquarian notion of, if you want to create something that people are going to remember, do a work of art. Or you could be maybe you're a philosopher, you want to write some philosophy that people read that much, much later. I don't know if people are going to be reading op-eds 1,000 years from now. So I write a lot of op-eds. I don't know if it's going to be timely though. So you read something from a year later, and it's like, oh, this isn't timely anymore. It's no longer interesting. And sometimes I feel like my day job is merely to chronicle the fall of the Republic. Like all we're doing is providing footnotes for the Edward Gibbon of 1,000 years from now, the decline and fall of the American Republic. So 1,000 years from now, Edward Gibbon will be reincarnated, and he will be writing the decline and fall of the American Republic. And they'll find footnotes from op-eds like the ones I write in my day job. Possibly. Assuming that, it's all on the internet. What if we fail? What if we have a tyrannical outcome? Wouldn't the tyrants just delete the internet? Make it so you can't remember history? Destroy history. That's what the Nazis tried to do. They were burning all the books. What if someone succeeded? Like, what if they wiped out all of human knowledge? That's kind of what happened after the fall of the Roman Empire, though. Very interesting. So you lose, in the process of the empire falling and Rome's being raided, a lot of the knowledge of antiquity was lost. The Byzantine Empire would have preserved a lot of it because that didn't fall until centuries later, when you had the Islamic invasions and Turkey became no longer Christian. It wasn't called Turkey back then, but Byzantium would eventually fall. But what ended up happening, though, through the Crusades and attempts to reclaim the Holy Land, was knowledge from the East, which preserved a lot of antiquity, like Aristotle, was then exported back to the West, and then it repopulated. There were a lot of translations. The church would have had an interest in preserving a lot of these works and bringing them out. And then, because the church was responsible for education. But eventually the things like Aristotle find their way back to the West, and it has a massive impact. After the Black Death, you have a Renaissance. And a lot of that was just a rediscovery of the ideas from the past. So kind of, I don't know if that's strictly what Renaissance means. I have to look it up. What does Renaissance mean? Like, what is the definition? I know it's a period in history that follows the Black Death. Let's see here. Go back to StreamYard here for a second. Twitter. Oh, someone's writing to me. See what else is going on here. Renaissance, that's what I was looking up. I should sending a note. Yeah, Renaissance is a French word meaning rebirth. This is from Britannica.com. Rebirth, yeah, so it means rebirth. So it's this rediscovery of the ideas from antiquity. And this leads to the Enlightenment. This leads to many of the great political philosophy works that came afterwards, whether you're talking about natural law theory or one of my favorites, Machiavelli. Machiavelli was a great philosopher. He was also an advisor, think of him like a Renaissance era national security advisor or something like that. And he wrote The Prince. Everyone knows The Prince, but he also wrote discourses on Livy. And he was basically saying, if you can live in a republic, live in a republic. They're way better. You have freedom. They're more stable if you can keep them. But if you're a prince and, you're trying to govern a principality, here's the rules for a prince. But I like discourses because he makes a lot of interesting arguments in favor of kind of republics and liberty. You also eventually get to, guys like I mentioned Locke, but, Hobbes, who came before him, and kind of the advent of social contract theory. All of this comes out because of the rediscovery of antiquarian ideas, ideas from antiquity that occurred during the Renaissance. And that eventually leads to the American Revolution, the French Revolution. So, but for that rediscovery of knowledge, maybe it's one thing that comes out of. I think it happens in part because of the Crusades. That there's this, people were in the area and they happened to be gathering up not only artifacts, but, texts and things like that. And then they kind of spoils of war. But, this preservation of history. So even if the big tech overlords try to erase history, will they succeed? I don't think they will. I think there's more of us than there are of them. And that ultimately history prevails, knowledge. You cannot destroy an idea. So that gives me comfort that, maybe there will be an Edward Gibbon 1,000 years from now. And they'll say, oh, how did the American Republic fall? Well, let's see what Romano is saying. Maybe my significance will live on. Like, I actually did make a contribution that ultimately, perhaps, maybe somebody will say, oh, there were a few who were resisting and still talking about limited government and liberty. And so if that's true, I feel like maybe I've already done that. I've already written anything that might be interesting 1,000 years from now when people need to try to reclaim liberty. And I've said what I want to say on the topic. So now I want to draw. So you go to my Twitter, Robert_J_Romano on Twitter. And that's where I post art and music. That's where I promote Comicsgate. Because you could do politics for a very long time, and I could spend the rest of my life doing it. I probably will. I mean, the odds that I will make a best-selling graphic novel are probably quite low. So maybe this is just a nice diversion for me while I'm still, fighting the culture war and the political wars in a civil manner. We try to preserve the civil society. It's critical. Need the civil society. It's what makes the rest of this possible. There's some fools who would like to, I think, live in the state of nature. Maybe they think it would be fun to go around foraging and not have any society to weigh down, moral considerations. See if anyone's checking in here. Probably not. Maybe you're listening, though. Thank you to anyone who's listening. This is just a reason for me to sit down and do my artwork and chat. And, never know. Someone might tune out on a rewind. That'd be nice. I mean, I'd love to. I always joked at the office that I should have went to comic book school. 2008, the economy's crashing. It's like, I knew it. I should have went to comic book school. I wanted to go to the Joe Kubert school. I ended up going to art school. I figured, either way, you're in art, you're going to learn how to draw. So that part worked. I definitely got enough practice with life drawing and everything, figure drawing, in my view. And I had started practicing all the way in high school. And it's just one of those things you got to keep practicing, keep drawing. So here I am, still practicing, still drawing. And what a mess. You see all these black dots? So the next time I ink a page, and I pretty much took a year off from this to build the website. But the next time I ink a page, I'm going to probably have, definitely should I draw all of the lines in pencil only to ink right over them? Like, do I need to know where all of the lines are going to be? On shading, probably not. For the outline, probably so. So maybe I don't need to shade my pencils so much. Although I scanned this piece when it was still in pencils, and I loved it. I was like, oh wow, this came out amazing. I'm so happy with this. I made a comic book page in full pencils. And in pencil, it was a finished work of art into itself. So it's just, and my other idea was that in case anything went wrong with the inking, I'll scan the pencils. So if anything goes wrong and I need to do it over, I can print it again. Maybe print it in blue and use the blue line technique and ink over that and print it onto an artboard. So get another bite at the apple there. But I think it came out good. I just need to clean it up now. But what a pain. It's, maybe I should do digital. Save some time. I won't get all these black dots. I won't be needing to scan anything. Or I can try inking. Digitally. But I like brushes and quills and rapidographs. I used to draw with a rapidograph in high school. I used calligraphy pens. That I ended up actually doing a lot of with that because I like to get broad lines. And for this piece, though, I used I listened to Comicsgate and other independent creators' advice. So let's see, what do we got in the drawer here? What did we use? We used, I have a finito here for some of the thicker lines. Let's see. I have a Pentel art brush. Lots of Copic multi-liners. Also microns. I did a lot with the microns. And so just a combination of stuff like that. And there was one pen that was actually my favorite pen. Which one was it? No, not that one. I want to say it was the finito, but it wasn't the finito. What was my favorite one? Was it a... No, I don't think it was that one either. I want to tell you the right one. So what was the one I was really happy with? I did most of the work with. Here it is. It was a Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen, black 199. I found it had a pretty good weight to do much of the outline stuff. And so when I was creating a baseline, before I come in with the thicker stuff, I was using what was it called? Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen S. Okay, I guess the S is the size. It was a small. I thought that was a pretty good pen. You go to Michael's and you see what they have. Start grabbing stuff and you experiment with it. See what works for you. What works for you is not going to be what works for other people. And I'm just still learning this process. And I want to figure out how to, do the colors. I got some grayscale here. When I get bored with cleaning this up, I will do some grayscale. Let's see here. Anyone check in? Yesterday's Fool says, I'm listening. Hi, Yesterday's Fool. Thank you for checking in. I will keep my eye on the chat since we have confirmed viewers. I am not just speaking into the ether. But yeah, you got to clean up all these black dots, and it's really working. I'm really excited actually about what the impact is here. I've cleaned up most of Mortacia here. I cleaned up a lot of the hair that was on the stairs here. I wanted to kind of get a crisp, clean outline there. And I'm learning. Like, when you're pen and inking, you got to be careful, number one. And number two, don't worry if you make a mistake because you can just clean it up digitally. And so you can, you'll be more, there's a lot you can do digitally to either touch these things up or, I'm sharpening some of the lines here, creating effect I probably cannot at this moment do naturally. But I like the way it looks, and I'm learning like, how do you clean it up? While I'm in here, let's sharpen up these lines. Is that cheating? If I were passing this off as the original, said, you're going to buy my original piece, this is what it looks like, that would probably be cheating. I say, this has been digitally altered for print. You want it to look good in print. So all of this stuff needs to go. All these black dots have to go. It'll help with the coloring process. And it'll give a nice cleaner look on the pen and ink stuff. So I want to show what I can do with pen and ink. And it's like, okay, this is a freaking mess here. I got to clean this up. Even if it takes longer. Because I'm not on a deadline. I have not crowdfunded anything yet. And I will have to be significantly into this to this project on my own. Because I got a family to feed and I can't quit my day job. Don't quit your day job, Robert. And then some will argue, you can't quit your day job, Robert. We need you out there in Washington, D.C., writing op-eds and press releases and conducting research that is valuable to the survival of the Republic. Maybe. Or maybe. It doesn't matter. Maybe the most important decisions about the future of this country have already been made. And only in vain will I try to oppose it. Only in vain. The bard, Shakespeare, says, "'Tis all but vanity." I think that's the quote. Something like that. "'Tis all but vanity." And he's commenting, I think, on the state of human affairs. That we do lots of stuff, whether it's art or music or politics, try to acquire power out of vanity. Is that true? Are we only just trying to, that is the antiquarian notion, is that you want to be remembered. You don't want to be forgotten. Watching a cool show from yesteryear called Andromeda, Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda. You can catch it on Amazon. My wife and I were going through the seasons now. And it's fun. It's got Kevin Sorbo. And, if you like Farscape and you like Star Trek, you'll probably like Andromeda. And, Captain Dylan Hunt is trying to restore the system's commonwealth 300 years after its collapse. Sound familiar? Maybe that's what will happen here. Then 300 years or 3,000 years, Captain Dylan Hunt will arrive, try to restore the American Republic. Nah. Or of course, a lot of bad things can happen in the interim. That's why I always say, preserve the civil society. We will not like the state of nature. Your kids will definitely not like the state of nature if they survive. If you have a family, you have an interest in the state of nature. It is in your natural interest to avoid cataclysmic revolutions, especially in this day and age. Would you trust? It's like, oh, do you trust the government? And people are like, no, don't trust the government. Well, why would you want to be in a situation where you have to choose between them protecting your neighborhood and somebody who's saying we need to fight for liberty in vain? Like, oh, you can't win. So then some people just want to go out and they just want to have one last go, kind of like the Alamo. You see lots of stuff, lots of commentary in that direction nowadays. It's very alarming. It should be alarming. If it's not alarming to you, I would ask you to pause and reconsider. We have to preserve the civil society. It is essential to our future. Absolutely essential. That's what makes opposition possible. That's what makes having elections possible. That's what makes having a constitution possible. No civil society, no constitution, no liberty. John Adams called it ordered liberty, I think. Ordered liberty. And the framers of the Constitution were very mindful that even though the country was born out of revolution, that they needed to create something that was stable and that would last, that could survive the civil wars that destroyed republics before it. They were mindful of the history there of the Roman Republic. Good series to watch on HBO would be Rome, if you want to see what can go wrong in a republic. It's when they start prosecuting one another. It's when you start viewing your neighbors as enemies. Gina Carano got deplatformed for retweeting a meme that noted that in the Holocaust, it was neighbors who were ratting on neighbors and turning their neighbors in that made, in part, the conditions that led to the Holocaust possible. But this is nothing new under the sun. That wasn't the first time that it happened in history. Gina Carano was right. And so I recommend Rome. You can see how it happened there. They try to prosecute Caesar. Cato wants to try Caesar for treason, and it leads to a cataclysmic civil war. They want to declare him a dictator, and it leads to a cataclysmic civil war that, in their fit to try to save the Republic from Caesar, who at the time wasn't necessarily trying to overthrow the Republic, the civil war that resulted destroyed the Republic. And then you got an empire. You had the emperor Now, the Senate was preserved. Octavian, who becomes Augustus, was very wise and realized that he would need the Senate there to administer much of the government. So there's some who argue that actually Caesar and the emperors that came afterwards, they saved the republic and just transformed it into something new. And maybe you had to, but really the problem with that form of government is that you're definitely dependent upon the benevolence of whoever the emperor is. If you don't have a good emperor, you won't have a good form of government, and it won't be representative of the people. The will of the people, the needs of the people will not be fulfilled. So you have to be careful. It's like, oh, you don't want to create a situation that leads to tyranny. So you have to be smart. You have to be very, very smart about what you're going to do if you're going to try to get involved with politics or power, situations of power. And fortunately, nothing too bad has happened, despite some of the rhetoric that you might see on social media, message boards, and what have you. But, just be careful what you wish for. Cato thought he was saving the republic, but he was helping to destroy it. Because what can you do when you have someone who's in power that you disagree with? You voice opposition, you field candidates to oppose those policies, and eventually you'll get your chance. So if you're a Republican right now, you're alarmed about the Democrats being in power to control all three branches of government. Oh my goodness, we'll never be in power again. Fact, Joe Biden is the weakest first-term Democratic president since Grover Cleveland. He has a 0-seat majority in the Senate. Republicans only need to pick up 1 seat in the Senate in 2022, and they'll have a majority again. And then, then appointments won't be so easy. There's not much of a majority in the House. A few seats will switch the power back. So we're not in an irreconcilably bad situation. Republicans were in a far worse situation in 1932. And in 1934, FDR kicked the shit out of Republicans in the midterms during the Great Depression. Republicans were wiped out almost to the point of extinction. We think like, oh, there was one-party rule now. We have one-party rule. It's like, yeah, no, we're pretty much on the cusp of that via institutions and other things. But in the 30s, you had de facto one-party rule all the way until Eisenhower. There was 2 years when Republicans after World War II were able to reclaim majorities in the legislature, but that was short-lived, and it wasn't until Eisenhower that Republicans ever came back into power. So they went from 1932 to 1952 without being in power, as FDR was elected to 4 consecutive terms. But somehow the Republic survived, probably because FDR was a good president and he wasn't trying to destroy his opponents. He united the country through the Depression and World War II. And he didn't get there without Republicans voting for him. So I think there was kind of a bipartisan, Depression consensus, such as it was. In hindsight, we, a lot of people are very critical of the policies during the Depression. And it's like anything else. They probably got some things right and some things wrong. You got Social Security out of that. And, people are very critical of the Social Security system, and it's certainly got its problems. But how many of your parents, I wonder, and your grandparents before them depended on Social Security when they were old? And won't we depend on it too? Probably. I mean, if you think your investments are going to pay out, then you probably don't need Social Security. But lots of people really depend on that stuff. So I wouldn't... So I don't see anyone proposing to eliminate it. You want to modify it, perhaps, make it more profitable. What they do right now is they take their surplus revenue and they invest it in treasuries. Maybe they should invest it in something besides treasuries. Treasuries have really low interest rates right now. I bet you they can make more money for the lifetime of Social Security and Medicare They should have listened to Bush. Bush was saying in the early 2000s that they should invest it in equities. And if they had done that, I think that they say, oh, well, look at the 2008 crash. And it's like, yeah. And then look at the 2009 rally, the 2010 rally, the 2011 rally, the 2012 rally. Over the course of time, equities are definitely beating bond interest rates. So if you're trying to preserve the longevity of a program by investing surplus revenue, you can have a diverse portfolio. I don't know. So I spend a lot of time looking at financial stuff. Let's see if anyone's checking in. Nope. Well, whoever's out there and listening, thank you. Let's see. Well, it's almost 4 o'clock. Have to go do some weeding in the garden soon. Got to weed the garden. Got tomato plants, eggplant, zucchini. It's all quite delicious. I made some eggplant last night. I want to make some sauce today. It's the other thing I got to do. Maybe I'll just keep drawing, skip mowing the lawn. It's not like we got that much rain this week. Seems like once the summer in Virginia gets really hot, sometimes if it doesn't rain, you don't need to mow the lawn. You're just mowing dead, dry grass anyways. You just get like create a big dust bowl when you're going around the yard. So you do what you have to do. So I'll get out there and easier to do undo with Control Z. If you lift up your pen while you're doing it, lift back, and then when you hit Control Z, you're only coming in between 1 or 2 brush strokes. If you keep it pressed down, though, that's going to be all one action, which is good if you make a mistake. You can make lots of mistakes, but the computer lets you undo your mistakes. It's the advantage of digital. It's probably why digital artists are faster. So I say, should I do digital? I like the way, I don't know, I'm not very good at drawing in digital. I don't feel confident. I need to be able to hold the pencil in my hand, feel the paper. But the great thing about this medium is there's not just one way to do things. You can do it your way and be successful. And many different styles. What's so cool about Comicsgate is that so many different styles and ideas all coming into play. And create the creative freedom to do it. That's pretty cool. That's very appealing. It should be. Because if you were to try it, we couldn't do this in the mainstream nowadays because of the way these corporations are run. Once you're publicly traded, they're pretty much getting infiltrated and taken over. If you want to look up what company should I be worried about and opposing, they probably signed the CEO Diversity Pledge. I think that's what it's called. Let's see. CEO Diversity Pledge. Yeah. If you Google CEO Diversity Pledge, you'll find a website called ceoaction.com. And from there, you'll get a list of companies, hundreds of companies, who have signed on to the Diversity and Inclusion Pledge that is in all of these companies' corporate bylaws or their corporate annual reports, essentially their charters, their pamphlets for investors. They want to attract hundreds of billions of dollars. Check out the video I just did on ESG investing. Over $50 trillion will be invested in social justice companies and investing by 2025. And so how do we stand up against that? Well, we're going to protect our IPs, never sell, never go public, can't go public. Even if you think you could raise a lot of money by going public, or, oh, I'll just own the majority of the shares or something like that. You're asking for it. You're asking for trouble. be privately held, protect your company, protect your future, the legacy that you're leaving to your kids. Don't sell it. Just ask George Lucas if that was a good idea. It's a rhetorical question. Of course it wasn't a good idea. Although everyone was very excited at the time, new Star Wars, I was excited. I was like, oh, wow. I had a coworker, he said he was certifiably excited that there would be new Star Wars. Harrison Ford was coming back. How could they possibly mess that up? Well, the biggest flaw was probably not having Han, Luke, and Leia be in the same movie. Not even in a scene. They didn't even get one scene together before Carrie Fisher died, before they killed off Han Solo. What a mistake. We have Harrison Ford for one movie. What should we do with him? Keep him away from Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher for as much as possible. We'll have them be divorced. Him and Leia don't make it as a couple. They're failed parents. What a depressing movie. Even Force Awakens. A lot more people like Force Awakens than Last Jedi and what came after. Like, oh, it could have been good. Yeah, except for that one fatal flaw. Han Solo's dead, and he never gets to do any scenes with Luke, his best friend. I mean, other than that, The Force Awakens was amazing, right? Not really. I was disappointed with it. When I saw it, I said, this wasn't better than the prequels. A lot of people are like, oh, I hate the prequels. I hate Jar Jar Binks. And it's like, and so here you have the new Indiana Jones coming out right now. And my view on that is, I liked the Crystal Skull when I saw it. I really did. I enjoyed seeing Indy again. Harrison Ford. He had a son who's whiny, just like all other Lucasfilm teenagers or 20-year-olds or 30. I guess he's filming it. He's probably like in his 30s or late 20s. I forget. That was back in 2008. Shia LaBeouf. But I prefer that. And maybe we'll luck out. Maybe the new Indiana Jones won't be horrible. I want it to be good. I want to support Harrison Ford. He's my favorite actor. I grew up with that stuff. How do you not support it? You want it to be good. But it might not be. It might be that because Disney's making it, that they're not allowed to make Indiana Jones the way we know and love him to be. And they might, I won't say they ruin it because they can't ruin it. The Spielberg movies, the ones that he directed, classic. They'll always be good. But it could be that with the new Indy, you'll beg for the Crystal Skull before the end. You'll say, oh man, this is worse than the Crystal Skull. Watch for it. It could be good though. Harrison Ford makes everything he's in better. The reason people enjoyed, I think, The Force Awakening mostly was because of Harrison Ford. And so that was arguably the best part of the movie, was seeing Han Solo again. Seeing him die, not so much. And so you kind of see that pattern where they're going to kill your favorite characters. Everyone's complaining about He-Man right now. They killed a favorite character, the title character. So like if they kill Indy in this new movie, you'll know what happened. They wanted to demoralize us. These are acts of war. This is fratricide. I call it fratricide. It was done intentionally. People are like, oh, it's an accident. They're just bad. They just don't have any talent. The people making these crap nowadays, oh, it's because they don't have talent. Like it was all a coincidence. Like, oh, they just hired the most untalented people and they all just happened to produce social justice pamphlets. Or, that could be a coincidence, or it's done intentionally. It's done by design. It's done to get just this reaction from us. But the reaction is useful if we're not merely complaining, but we're saying, let's make our own. Let's do our own thing. Because then you can get people who are coming in. They want to find out, like a lot of the fandom menace grew up dramatically because of The Last Jedi. So keep in mind what made you successful to begin with. It's important. And so one of the things that Comicsgate and the Fandom Menace do is they criticize pop culture. They criticize the mainstream. And what Comicsgate does, that's in addition to that, is they say, here's an alternative to mainstream comic books, to mainstream pop culture. And Comicsgate is interesting because you don't just get the books. You get the creator. You get lots of access to the creator. You get to hang out on live streams with them. That's entertaining too. Now, are draw streams entertaining? Probably not. Definitely need some commentary there. Needs something going on. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of lines, dragon wings. So I'm trying to make this as entertaining as possible. Look at that. Isn't that much cleaner now? Look at that. Much, much cleaner. The colors will come in much, much better. We're almost done cleaning up this dragon wing here. Mortacia, goddess of death, trying to reclaim her throne in Hades. But maybe she won't succeed. Maybe she's up against insurmountable odds. But she really cares about humanity. She was there when humanity was created. It was actually a compromise to end the dragon wars. She's a goddess of death, and the gods are dragons, basically. So people in Danae, they basically worship the dragons because they're the biggest things in town, and they fear the gods because they've seen the gods. They know what they can do. And so the dragon wars were horrible. Mortacia wanted to end them. And so after Atlas destroys Erithus, but the dragon wars are continuing, she gives him, her brother, a human. And she says, let these be your instrument of war. Instead, use humans. And so Atlas goes in a different direction. He sees how adaptable humans are and how they would make great instruments of war. And so the dragon wars end and human society kind of begins there. And so she really cares about humanity. So the fact that she's failed to maintain the throne at Hades, and now all of humanity is being tortured, whether you were good or bad, you're going to hell, and Erithus and demons are going to torture you. That is unacceptable for her. She's going to try to save everyone. Emphasis on try. Because it won't be easy. She's probably going to need help. And not just in Hades, because there's not much the humans can really do to help her there. Not much at all. Although they're going to try to. They will play a role. She's going to try to teach them how to resist and to, basically be a staging ground or be there to assist people who might come to help later. Even if it takes centuries or decades. Because it could take a long time. This is a generational conflict. But she needs to try. She has to try to save these people. So all she needs to do is go to Hades, defeat Erithus, and reclaim her throne. But she's kind of lost some of her power thanks to the presence of the undead. on Danae, her power to render judgment in death. Just say you lived a good life, you get to go to paradise, or you were okay, you got to spend a little time here in Hades. Have a penance. That's being undone. Every time you make a new undead, a new zombie or vampire or ghoul or wraith or whatever, she didn't intend for that to happen. You're supposed to be dead. Like, you stay dead. So when you make an undead, you're undoing her power. So that's why she had to flee Hades. So that's why her plan to reclaim the throne might be ill-advised. But you'll find out. Children of the Grave, Volume 1, how that works out for her. We shall see. Should be interesting. And if I ever finish it, at this rate, look at the tediousness of all this. My goodness. So I definitely got to definitely go lighter touch on future pages. It shouldn't be this heavy. It shouldn't be this much mess to clean up. Because that's a process all unto itself. But if it looks good, is it worth it? So there's a balance there. I'll have to learn to work faster, make fewer mistakes when I'm doing my original pen and ink. And then there'll be less of a mess to clean up. And then I have to make an important decision about whether I should hire a colorist. Might need to. My colors are not strong on this digital format. If I were painting it, I think I could do better, but I need to learn how to do this digitally. But it's like anything else, you practice. Practice makes perfect. Yeah, I don't like that. Back. Go forward. Okay. Frege says to just black it out. And there's a lot of white dots in here too. Some of them, though, are as a result of cross-hatching, and they're not actually flaws. They really were white paper. But I think the way they print and the way they render, you need to have that. If it's a white line, it needs to be a white line. You just have to get rid of those little black dots. They shouldn't look pixelated. The inks should not look pixelated. They should look very crisp. It has to be cleaned up. If I want this to look the way I want it to look, I need to clean this up. What a pain, though. So we almost done with this wing? How much work do we have left to finish this wing? Lots. Lots of work. All right. Take a pause there. Let's zoom out before I hit save. Indiscriminately hit save after you made a huge mistake. I don't see any huge mistakes. So should I make that a line? Looks like it used to be a line. Maybe I didn't use a thick enough brush. Or maybe that's a pencil line. Does it look better? Let's see. Just fill in what's there. It won't look horrible. Got 3 here. Let's just complete it. See, does that help it? Does it hurt it? Maybe you come up here. Go a little thicker. Let's make it look like a part of what I was doing. Yeah, it doesn't look horrible. There's still some white dots here that need to be cleaned up. What a pain. Go away, white dots, black dots, white dots everywhere. What a mess. But it's got to be done. No one else is going to make your book for you. You got to do it yourself. Well, you could hire someone. Like, I could hire people to make a book. But it won't be the same. It won't be my vision. So I'm very committed to, at least for now, creating the baseline for Children of the Grave. There's a lot going on in the gaming world right now with Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons, which in my view has really suffered a major decline the past couple of decades. To me, it's all downhill after the third edition. The third edition was really cool. After Wizards took over for TSR, they come in with third edition. They support independent creators with the D20 system and say, hey, you want to make your own? We want more publishers using the Dungeons and Dragons system of rules, because then that will mean more people buy the player's handbook. It was a really smart idea. And what happened is kind of similar to what you see in indie crowdfunding right now, is that the market became saturated with a lot of independent creators, and not all of them could succeed, but some of them are still around. Names you probably recognize. I see that Mongoose Publishing is still going strong. Congratulations to them. I remember them back in the day. And there's others that are still around. I'm trying to remember everyone's name. That was 20 years ago. I had my own little shop. I put an ad in the EN World newsletter. The first issue, they were coming out with this new newsletter. I said, oh, I should put an ad in there. Find writers, find artists, find people who want to try to create a campaign setting. And it worked. It was a good ad. Very effective. A lot of people contacted us. So I had a writers group, basically. But I was young and stupid, so I made a lot of mistakes, as you might imagine. A lot of mistakes. Being 21, that's what you do. Make mistakes and you learn from them, hopefully. I completed one book for the setting, a city book called Atten. It's the name of the city where a lot of the action occurs on the surface. So you have the Fiorian Peninsula, and there's a war, regional war, that's breaking out between Atten and Prakis. And my idea was that it should be kind of like the Peloponnesian Wars, that it goes on. Think, oh, we'll have the troops home by Christmas, but then it goes on for like 20 years. It's just like a generational conflict. In history, eventually Sparta wins, defeats Athens in the Peloponnesian Wars. Changed the course of history. But Aten is a kind of a hybrid republic that's ruled by nobles, but it also has a Congress, kind of a new thing. They say, oh, we need someone who can conduct foreign policies, and you nobles really can't agree upon amongst yourselves what the foreign policy of the city-state should be, so we're going to set up something that administers foreign policy. And so they have a Congress there. And they're trying to join the Dionysian Empire, the Golden Empire, very far to the north. It's kind of basically a Roman empire. That's a stabilizing force in society. In the world of Danae, they're basically a Roman empire. And so some will say, oh, you're making a commentary about the Roman Empire and that they brought stability. Of course they brought stability. Of course they did. And you know that because after the Roman Empire fell, you had what they called the Dark Ages, and a lot of knowledge was lost. A lot of people died. Life expectancy probably was shortened. Now, a large part of that is because of the plague and inadequate health care, bad water, droughts, all sorts of things. But the other part of it was that you had a tremendous power vacuum that occurred after the fall of the Western Empire. which is very bad for Europe. And you could say, argue it ultimately turns out good, and so, but at the time, it wasn't so good. You wouldn't want to be there at the fall of Rome. That wasn't a good time. It wasn't good for those people. It wasn't good for the Romans. Romans lost everything, including being the capital of the empire. What an insult that must have been to the Romans. Hi. Yeah, we're moving the capital to the east. We're changing your religion. And we're taking, I don't know, all your power and influence. That probably didn't go over too well. I bet you there were people who were angry about that. Centuries later, one of those people who criticized that was Machiavelli. But you could say he was biased because he was a pagan. But I don't think the fall of the empire, though, was necessarily a good positive. It set history back probably, maybe by as much as 1,000 years. Like if America went away today, America's absolutely a stabilizing force in the world. Absolutely. Some will say, oh, we're destabilizing. It's around the periphery. Yeah, there are things we get involved with that may be viewed as destabilizing. But ultimately, in the great scheme of things, America, whether via the Cold War, World War II, we've proven to be a stabilizing force, and we help other countries along the way to become democracies, to become republics, which I think benefits and has helped to advance human society in this modern era. The freedom you have to create things right now is largely because of the success of America not being dominated either by her neighbors or adversaries overseas. So if you support liberty, you should want America to be strong. And I look at the fall of the Roman Empire as a perfect example of what could go wrong. It's a historical example of what could go wrong if a great power suddenly ceases to function as a great power. It creates a power vacuum, which creates wars, could create slaughters, genocides in this modern era. Who knows how bad it could be? So be careful what you wish for. You rabble-rousers out there, I'm watching you. I know what you're up to. You might not realize what you're up to, but I can see it. With the benefit of history, we can prevent ourselves from making cataclysmic errors of judgment that lead to unintended consequences. So watch out, you rabble-rousers, you radicals. That's not a conservative avenue. We want to avoid political violence, too. I would recommend against that. Doesn't work out for the people who are committing the violence, usually. Something to be watchful of. Anyways, that's my soapbox. Maybe you have your own opinion here. Maybe somebody's trying to check in. Let's check. Probably not. Well, whoever's listening, thank you for listening. What is it, 4:24 now? We done with this wing yet? Damn, this is very labor-intensive stuff. Writing is much faster. Come up with your ideas. Soon, before you know it, you're up to like 300 words. You get up to 600, 700 words. That's pretty much an op-ed, so better have a beginning, middle, and end. And a good op-ed is going to have at least one fact in it that will interest an op-ed editor. That's who you need to impress, your op-ed editor. And bring a fact to the table that people aren't particularly aware of that will make either a good lead or a good headline. And then you can kind of talk about kind of the minimal or maximal impact that this fact, what does this fact mean? What are the implications of this? You can usually do a pretty decent job with about 750 words. Sometimes it's a simple point. You can get it done in 600 words. I think a typical editorial might be about that long. 600, 700 words. But if it requires more thought or there's a lot of moving pieces, you probably want to move it into a column format, which is not really an op-ed, opposite editorial. That's what an op-ed is. Then you want to kind of, maybe you're going to be up to like 1,000 words or 1,500 words. Sometimes you have to write a longer piece, which could be like, end up being like, oh, that would be a chapter in a book. Will comprise of about 2 to 3 or 4 or more essays that kind of connect together, which is not a bad idea. So one idea I've had is, just take all my columns, take the good ones, recompile them, and sell a book. Would anyone buy my book? Probably not. Maybe no. Maybe it's worth putting out there. You come up with a good enough title, people can gravitate towards it. But maybe I'm just tired of politics. Aren't you tired of politics? I think the only people who aren't tired of politics are people who don't work in politics. You see a lot of that in the, I noticed a lot of that. A lot of folks on the outside of politics who want to get into it. They want to talk about it. But it might be repulsive to potential, if you're trying to sell a book, customers. Although people are interested in what the creators have to say about things, so maybe there's a balance there. I don't have to completely embargo my political thoughts because they're pretty integral into who I am right now. But maybe I just don't make it too partisan. I don't know. What's the balance there? Don't talk about politics at all. I'm going to turn off people. I think it's okay to say what you think. Does that impact? Am I bringing a social agenda to my story here about restoring freedom to the afterlife? Probably not. There's no hidden political agenda there. This is just a story about how the goddess of death needs to get her power back so that the humanity, which is getting tortured, no matter if you're good or bad, you're born, you live, you die, you're going to hell. That's the elevator pitch. And what would that mean? How would that play out in the afterlife? But what if this information somehow leaked out into the mortal world and humans knew that no matter what they did, they were going to go to hell? This would turn, I think, everything on its head. The way you think about religion now is like, oh, you got to live a good life and then you'll get to go to paradise. There's a promise of paradise. So I'm taking away the promise of paradise. What will happen? How will people react to it, and how will they try to avoid their fate? So some people will join with the goddess of undeath, and they'll say, make me undead. I don't want to go to hell. Make me a zombie. Make me a vampire or whatever. Make me undead. So some people would choose to be undead. Some people will choose to help the demons, to help out Arithis with the hopes of a station in hell. So they would maybe be, they decide to become collaborators. And so they try to oppose Mortasia and Atenus and some of the other gods that are trying to restore the balance. And they collaborate with the enemy in hopes that they'll be spared in the afterlife. And they won't be one of the ones who's tortured. Pretty shitty thing to do. But if you knew that you're going to die and go to hell, how would that alter the decisions that thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people make? I think it would alter it dramatically, especially if you knew the afterlife was real and that you'd be tortured. It create a powerful incentive to help out the evil gods. And so I think that's what the world would look like. But like in Lord of the Rings, Sauron's pretty powerful. Looks like he's going to win. And if you oppose him, you're almost certainly consigning yourself to oblivion. That's why Saruman helps him out. But like that, there's going to be some people who resist. All the same. They want liberty. They want their freedom. They want their country to survive. And they're not going to go along with this. But maybe there won't be as many of them as there would be But for this threat, their family, their ancestors are being held hostage. And they never had a chance to make a different decision. So maybe one of the things that will keep people good and making moral decisions and opposing this evil agenda of the evil gods to take over not only the afterlife, but the mortal world as well, because Dantulia, she wants everyone to be undead. She wants to destroy life itself. And the way to destroy life is by destroying death. And so she's going to try to destroy her niece, take all of her power, and just make the whole world undead if she can succeed. Erithus in Hades has his own agenda. He wants to get back to the surface. He wants to get back to the mortal world and probably start the Dragon Wars again, but he also wants revenge. That's a good enough reason. He wants to find his twin brother, Atenus, and destroy him. And so he's going to destroy everything Atenus loves. His golden empire. So it's like a big chessboard. And so you kind of take, that's what I love about D&D, is how the pantheons of gods and goddesses, very much like the Greek gods and goddesses, they're involved in human affairs, but they're almost sort of indifferent towards them. You find, I think that, do the gods and the Greek legends and myths, do they really care about the people? Sometimes it seems like they do. Zeus loved his women. There's no arguing that. If Zeus doesn't love his women, no Hercules, right? But Mortacia, she definitely cares about humanity. She's going to try to rescue them. She's going to try to sacrifice herself if she fails. She'd go into Hades, and she's basically got no one to help her. All the other gods they're too far away. They're not going to help her. They would have been along already. They've got other problems. They're not as concerned with the afterlife, maybe as they should be. Maybe they should be paying attention. But maybe she needs to get out of the underworld to make that known. Like, hey guys, need your help here. Send the champions, send your champions. We need to reclaim the underworld. What would that be like? What does she expect them to do? Like mount an invasion of hell? Go in there, destroy Erithus in glorious combat? Sounds like a suicide mission. You have to be an idiot. So maybe that's why it'll be a fun comic book. Something like that. Potential spoiler. So I'm not that far along. I'm just kind of setting the stage. Like, you can kind of let your imaginations take over. Think about ways for Mortacia to keep the balance of life and death and to achieve her objectives so that we don't lose the afterlife. But what will they lose along the way? What consequences, what unintended consequences of her actions will there be? Because she decided to go back to Hades. A lot of wrinkles, a lot of things could go wrong here. See, sometimes Clip Studio is going to save. So you have to pause, stop what you're doing, wait for the bar, then you can resume. Okay, let's see. Oh, that's looking much cleaner now. Much, much cleaner. It's getting late. I'm going to make sauce. I have to go make sauce really soon. Take all these plum tomatoes, these Roma tomatoes, Maybe I'll share my recipe with you. So what you do, get a bunch of tomatoes. You can go to your local supermarket, pick up a bunch of plum tomatoes or Roma tomatoes. They're basically the same. Some people prefer the plum tomatoes. And you need to skin them. So what you do is you kind of create a crosshatch. You core them, take out the core. And you create a crosshatch on the top and the bottom. And a big X on the top and the bottom of the tomato. And you put it in boiling water. And then you peel the skins. And after you peel the skins, how do you do that? Okay, so then you get them boiled. Looks like they're starting to peel. You put them into a bowl, and I usually drop ice on them. I want them to cool off as quickly as possible so that I'm not going to burn my fingers when I go to peel them. Hurts. Hot tomatoes, boiling hot tomatoes. You don't want to touch that. So what you have to, I put ice in the bowl. And then after you got all the skins off, you have tomato pulp. Basically what you would get if you were to buy a canned tomatoes. You get all the pulp. So you could just buy cans and, this would be where you open the can. Okay, now you have your tomato pulp. So how do you make your sauce now? What I do, I'll get some garlic, onion, chop that up, olive oil, salt and pepper, get it frying in a pan, get those onions and garlic caramelized. Then what I do is I'll either use balsamic vinegar or wine. I'll pour that into the onion garlic mixture, boil off the alcohol, and if I didn't mention it, you should have salt and peppered your onion garlic stuff, but before you put the wine on there. But then you add your tomato pulp, all of these tomatoes. So you have like 20 tomatoes. Make a big pot of sauce there. You're going to drop all that in. Add basil, fresh basil from your garden, oregano, some thyme perhaps, maybe some more pepper. Taste it. It's starting to taste good, but it's going to be really fresh, so you got to let it cook for a while, maybe an hour or so. Maybe even longer. You put it on a slow cooker. You can put it on a lower temperature. It'll take longer to cook, but it might taste different, might taste better. You try different methods. Add maybe a teaspoon of sugar. That should cut down on the acidity. And then what I do is you get some tomato paste. This is the part that's not coming from the garden, but it's probably necessary. You need tomato paste. So I take a can of tomato paste and I'll drop that into my big pot of sauce. Mix that around. And then by then it's getting really saucy. You've already added your herbs. Dang it. You've already added your herbs. You've already added your pepper and everything else. Then you're going to let that cook. And then you have sauce. Now what can you do? Well, one thing to do is make meatballs. Italian-style meatballs. So you take hopefully you have a hamburger concoction in your freezer. I take the chopped meat and I'll put some onion in it, some basil or parsley or both. I'll freeze that. So 2 really big burgers, and that's enough to make a bunch of meatballs. Give you the recipe for my meatballs. You take your burger, onion, parsley, basil concoction, maybe with a little olive oil, salt, and pepper in it. And you're going to add 2 eggs into a bowl with the meat. Take a ciabatta roll, toast it until it's very crispy. Add milk to that so it's a little soggy after toasting it. Some breadcrumbs and either Parmesan Romano cheese or just Pecorino Romano. You add cheese to that. Mix all that together. You'll see it can't, if it's a little soggy on the soggy side, maybe you need some more breadcrumbs. You kind of feel that out. Roll them into balls, and then you fry them. Doesn't take too long. I like making meatballs. They're very tasty. Everyone loves the meatballs. My wife, she likes to eat the meatballs more than the sauce and the noodles. I'll say, wait, you can't just eat the meatballs. That's like peeling the pepperoni off of a pizza and then leaving the rest for everyone else. You can't do that. So you got to make sure you have enough meatballs for the amount of pasta that you're making. Because what are you going to do with tomato sauce? You could, I suppose, make pizza out of it. But you don't need that much tomato sauce for pizza. And so for the amount of tomatoes you get out of a tomato garden, if your only plan is to make pizza, you don't need that many tomatoes. Because you could just make some sauce, freeze it, and then use it as you need it to spread it onto your pizza pies. But that's how I make my sauce. And if you want meatballs, make some meatballs. Getting hungry. That's the idea. I'm trying to tell my stomach it's time to eat soon. Let's see. What do we do with that line? Comes to a nice fine point. Why should we waste it? Let's see. We go down to 3 here. And just complete the line. There's still a lot of black dots here. I am not going to finish this wing today. The wing will be unfinished. I'm learning a lesson about, detail's great, but you have to clean it up. You have to be willing to go in there after you're done and clean that up, especially if you're doing it and scanning it. Now, if I made fewer mistakes on this first page I was working on, probably there'd be less to clean up. So hopefully what'll happen is I can still be very detailed, but I'll make fewer mistakes along the way as I refine the methodology for putting these pages together. And there'll be less of this. And maybe there's other tricks Tank Ferret was suggesting, using certain technique after you scan something to create sharper lines, and that might fix some of this. But I suspect that with this particular page, because of what I was doing when I was creating it, was I was learning to draw again. So I made a lot of mistakes on that first go there. You can draw in your head. So you leave your art class or your studio, you're thinking of ideas, you're still drawing in your mind. But after many years, you start to forget the process. So you got to keep the skills up. You got to keep practicing, keep drawing. If you do it every day, you'll get faster, become more accomplished, hopefully, produce a better drawing, something you could be proud of, something you want to hang up. This piece is actually hanging right in front of me. It's probably one reason why I spent so much time on it. I'm still spending time on it. I want it to be perfect, but I need to get faster. Fortunately, as I mentioned, I don't have a deadline. I could put this out when I feel like it, or not at all. Maybe it'll never be ready. I'll have to pass it on to future generations of Romanos. So, all right, son, here's where the story left off. But really, I just need to spend more time doing this and speeding up the process. And I think I can start to get a book done. I have a few more pages I'm working on right now. At the pencil stage, conceptualizing what's going to happen here. So we're in hell. She's trying to sees her city is in dire straits. She's going to spring into action. Batman sees an innocent soul being tortured. She's going to try to save her. She's got to contend with Frizzit the Hunter demon here, though. He's not going to want to let this soul go away too easily. So they're going to battle. It's going to be a battle. We'll see if she succeeds on the next page. Should we start a drawing here? Let's see how that wing's looking. Much cleaner. Much, much cleaner. You can see the line work much more contrasty, the way pen and ink ought to be. So I think this is a necessary process. Okay, it's getting late. So why don't I show you some of the grayscale. Let's hit save. We did a lot of work here, so let's save it in case there was a egregious mistake here. I'm just not seeing. Sometimes your mouse will start to do a big erase line. If you're dragging it around, it thinks the button is pushed or something, because the mouse button doubles as touching the screen. All right, so let's bring in some grayscale here. There's some grayscale. There's some more grayscale. And maybe the grayscale is almost done. Maybe it could be darker. I've been told, don't be afraid to go dark. Make it darker. And then I have to figure out how to bring color in. One method could be to just drop flats on my grayscale and then probably come on top of that with highlights. That's one way. And that would be akin to glazing via painting, the way the Renaissance painters would paint on top of black and white. So that was my idea, was, need to do grayscale first. Because I could always actually just publish in grayscale. Like, if this is cool enough and feel like, oh, I'll buy that, could kind of stop right there and say, oh, page is done, Robert. This panel's not done, though. This is too light. I need to darken that some more. And find a good balance. I want it to be more atmospheric. And so you kind of, really feel like it's grounded. It's there. So far, so good. I'm proud of this piece. And I definitely think that the line work, freeing up those, getting rid of those black dots, is definitely improving how the line work renders once you throw grayscale on there and ultimately color. So just a necessary step of the process here. All right, step out of grayscale. Hey, why don't you let me out? There we go. Oops, that's my white. Okie dokie. Maybe a few more minutes here, clean up a few more of these lines. This will be when someone wants to jump in. Someone will say, oh, sounds like he's about to go. I jump onto the stream. No. I've been doing this almost long enough. Ooh, need to get on the screen here. All right, there we go. Been going long enough. I hope you've enjoyed this stream. If you've been listening, or maybe you're hearing this on rewind, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications. Check out comicsgate.org, and you'll find just about 200 creators and their videos and their channels and their YouTube and their Twitter, and their projects, their Indiegogo projects, all in one location, very convenient. Sign up for the mailing list. You will get every video and a selection of projects in your inbox every day. More than you could back, probably, more than you could probably read in any conceivable time frame. If you're like me, you're working full time, and then when you actually have some free time for comics, you have to make a decision like, do I read a book? Should I go down and draw some more? So I'd say, a lot of balancing there. I've read some of the books I've purchased. I've purchased more books than I've read. The ones I've read, I've enjoyed. I recommend Earthbound, Part 1. I think Part 2 is going to be really good. I enjoyed that, the Narwhal books. And I'm back here, but it's almost time to go here. So let's just save our progress. This is Robert Romano with Comicskate.org. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. And you have a good evening. Take care.